Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Welcome. My name's Brianna Sittler. I am the Director of Special Programs here at Bay Path College. I coordinate the Kaleidoscope event, of which today's talk is in collaboration with the Jewish Federation of Western Mass. It's been awesome for them to come and talk to me about this. One of the things I'd like you to do is ask you to put your electronics on vibe so you don't interrupt anybody. It's with pleasure again that I announce today's event is sponsored by Bay Path College Kaleidoscope, People's Bank, Jewish Federation of Western Mass, and Bacon and Wilson Attorney at Law. Today's program will be about 30 to 40 minutes of talk. Then you have time for question and answer. You can come to each of these microphones to talk with A.J. Jacobs. And then afterwards, book sales in the back, and he'll be signing books over in the right-hand foyer. So with that, I'd like to actually welcome Josh Gray up to talk and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Brianna. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone coming out on this cold, albeit my understanding, football-free Sunday. So the Young Adult Division of the Jewish Federation of Western Massachusetts, in partnership with Bay Path College, People's Bank, and Bacon Wilson Attorneys at Law, are pleased to bring you this community program. I would like to thank Bay Path, People's Bank, and Bacon Wilson for their support, as well as the staff of the Jewish Federation of Western Mass, with a special thank you to Rachel Berezin, the director of the Young Adult Division for the Federation. So thank you. So AJ is editor-at-large for Esquire magazine and is a New York Times best-selling author. To say that AJ is always up for a challenge may be a bit of an understatement. In his humble quest to become the smartest person in the world and fill the ever-widening gap of his Ivy League education, Brown, by the way, AJ read all 33,000 pages of the Encyclopedia Britannica. He chronicled this journey from A to Z in 2004's The Know-It-All, which spent 8 weeks on the New York Times paperback bestseller list. It was praised by Time, Newsweek, Vanity Fair, and perhaps most impressively, AJ's Uncle Henry on Amazon.com. So in 2007, having quenched his thirst for knowledge, he shared his spiritual journey in the best-selling The Year of Living Biblically. The Year of Living Biblically spent 3 months on the New York Times bestseller list and was featured in and praised by magazines, the evangelical magazine Relevant, Penthouse magazine, and everything in between. But not one to leave well enough alone, AJ, having found knowledge and spiritual enlightenment, sought to complete the self-improvement trinity, to make over his body and become the healthiest person in the world. In Drop Dead Healthy, one man's humble quest for bodily perfection, AJ explored every aspect of his body, from biceps to brain, from testosterone to toenails, to get into shape. AJ lives on the Upper West Side of Manhattan with his wife, who clearly is very understanding, and his 3 sons. But he came to town yesterday to kick off the Young Adult Division's leadership program, and he is here this morning to share with you his life as a series of interesting and fascinating experiments. It's my pleasure to introduce A.J. Jacobs.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out, and thank you to the Jewish Federation of Western Massachusetts, to Bay Path College, Josh, Brianna, Rachel, and many other people I'm forgetting. But I'm having a lovely time. And I'm also happy to be in the 4th healthiest state in the United States. Congratulations, you guys. I come from New York, which is the 18th healthiest state, so I feel much better. I'm going to stay here. I feel like I'm going to live forever. I wanted to talk today about the mind, the spirit, and the body, a small topic. I thought I would start by just giving you some brief context on how I like to approach writing. what I like to do is I like to dive in and just immerse myself in my projects and become a human guinea pig. So I work at Esquire magazine, and a few years ago I wrote an article called My Outsourced Life. And for this one, I hired a team of people in Bangalore, India, to do everything for me. So they answered my emails, they responded to phone calls for me, they argued with my wife for me. And this was fantastic. This was the best month of my life because I just got to sit back and watch movies and read books. And a few months after that at Esquire, I wrote another article. And this one was called, about a movement called Radical Honesty. I don't know if any of you heard of it, but it is a movement where they say that you should never lie. But they go further than that. They say that whatever's on your brain should come out of your mouth. So I tried that for a month. That was the worst month of my life. I do not recommend that as a lifestyle. Luckily, I'm still married. But the name of the article was, I Think You're Fat, which in my defense, I never actually said that, but I said a similar thing. My first book, I decided to immerse myself in the world of knowledge and try to improve my mind. And when this came about because when I was a kid, my dad started to read the Encyclopedia Britannica, but he didn't quite finish. He made it to the middle of the letter B. So you could ask him about aqueducts and armadillos. He had cold, but Bolivia, that started to get hazy. So but he gave up because he loves books, he loves reading, but he had a life, he had a job. So about 10 years ago, I did not have much of a life. I had no family. So I said, what if I finish what he began and remove that black mark from our family history? So that's what I did. I started to read the encyclopedia, and it was a bit of a challenge, especially for those around me, because I was so enthusiastic, I couldn't help but share. So my wife started to charge me $1 for every irrelevant fact I inserted into conversation. So I would say, oh, I'm going to Springfield. Did you know that the first basketball game, the players kept tackling each other because they didn't understand the rules? And she would say, that's $1. So, but it was also a great experience in a way because it was uplifting. I got to read about the whole span of human history, all our highs and our lows. And in the end, it was clear to me that the highs did outweigh the lows, that we have made progress as a species. And, just think about 400 years ago in Europe, the average life expectancy was 35. So I'd be long gone. Or something, think about surgery without anesthesia. I mean, it's horrible to contemplate. That it was so bad that doctors would not tell their patients when the surgery was. They would just come to the house and do a surprise surgery because the idea was it was so horrible if you said we're going to do surgery on Thursday, they might kill themselves on Wednesday. So there is much to be thankful for, and it was uplifting. After that, I decided I've improved my mind a bit. Let me try my spirit. And that one came about because I grew up with no religion at all. As I say in the book, I'm Jewish, but I'm Jewish in the same way the Olive Garden is Italian, which is no offense to the Olive Garden, which is great breadsticks. But I wanted to learn about the Bible and my heritage. At that point, I had a kid, and I wanted to know what to teach him. So I thought one way to learn about the Bible would be to live it, to experience it from the inside, and almost walk in the footsteps of our forefathers. So first thing I did is I got a big stack of Bibles, all sorts of kinds. I got a board of spiritual advisors. So I had rabbis, but also ministers and priests and scholars. And then I wrote down all of the rules, all the pieces of advice I could find in the Bible. And as you know, this turned out to be quite a long list, over 600 rules. And I wanted to follow them all without picking and choosing, because I wanted to see, how will this improve my life, make my life better? How will it complicate my life, to put it mildly? So I wanted to follow the famous ones, like the Ten Commandments, which right there, in case you forgot. Love your neighbor, be fruitful and multiply, which I was, by the way. I was fruitful and multiplied. I had twin boys during the year, so I take my projects very seriously. And there they are. Thank you for the awe. That's very nice. I'll tell my wife. But I also, in addition, wanted to follow the rules that are less well known, that are sometimes overlooked. You know, the Bible says in Leviticus that you cannot shave the corners of your beard. I didn't know where the corners were, so I just let the whole thing grow. And by the end, I had this massive topiary on my chin. And I'll show you a little visual here of what happened. So there I am at the end. And as you might, I'll put it this way: I spent a lot of time at airport security with that look. I genuinely did. LL had some hours. The Bible also says that you cannot wear clothes made of mixed fibers. And this one seems so strange to me. I wondered, why would God care if I wore a polycotton blend? It seemed like God was micromanaging. But I thought, there's no way for me to know if this has any meaning for my life unless I try it. So I did. I got rid of all my mixed fiber clothing. And interestingly, some of the laws that seemed the most bizarre on the surface did turn out to have meaning for me by the end of the project. Not that one in particular, but many of the other ones. There's another law in Leviticus that says if two men are in a fight and the wife of one of the men grabs the private parts of the other man, then her hand shall be cut off. So I wanted to follow that one, of course. That one I followed by default, by not getting in a fight with another man whose wife was standing nearby looking like she could grip my parts. So there were many that were kind of easy to follow in that way, but there were also so many that were challenging. On the one hand, you had all of these rules about trying to avoid the everyday sins that we all commit. The Bible says no coveting, no gossiping, no lying. And I live in New York and I work as a journalist, so that's 70% of my day. So that was it was a big challenge. How do I do this moral makeover? How do I become a better person? One of the secrets that I learned from this year and from my other projects is that if you pretend to be a better person, eventually you become a bit of a better person. So they say in business, fake it till you make it. This also applies to every other aspect of life, to ethics. If you, during the year, for instance, I had a friend in the hospital. I didn't want to go visit, but I said, what would a compassionate person do? So they would go to the hospital. So I forced myself to go to the hospital. I tricked my mind. I'm in the hospital. I say, oh, I must be compassionate, and I become a little more compassionate. And they talk about this in psychology all the time, that if you behave in a certain way, then your thoughts will follow. The outer affects the inner. If you force yourself to smile, the studies show you become a little bit happier because you're tricking your brain. And they talk about this in Judaism. I didn't realize this, but it's a very Jewish notion. In Judaism, there's a phrase, deed before creed. And so the idea is if you follow the rules, follow the mitzvot, eventually your beliefs will change. So but it was still a challenge not to lie, covet, and gossip. But I made some headway. Another challenging part of the year was trying to follow the rules that don't really jibe all that well with modern American customs. The Leviticus has many rules on purity and how you are not supposed to touch women in their time of month. And if you take Leviticus really literally, you should not be sitting in a seat where a woman in her time of month has sat, because then the seat is impure and you become impure. Now, my wife found that offensive, so she sat in every seat in our apartment. I was forced to stand for most of the year, which, my next book after that was about health, and I learned that sitting is terrible for you. So she was doing me a favor in the end, so I thank her for that. There's also the rules in Leviticus about stoning adulterers. That was hard to pull off, but I figured I should try. So I was able to stone one adulterer. I'll tell you very quickly. I was in Central Park, and I was, at this point, getting really into the project. So I was trying to dress biblically as well. So I kind of looked like that. I didn't have the sheep. The sheep was a rental sheep. And this is me hailing a cab. That's the kind of... But I was dressed like that, and a man came up to me, and he said, why do you look like that? And I said, I'm trying to live by all the rules of the Bible, from the 10 Commandments right on down to stoning adulterers. And he said, well, I'm an adulterer. Are you going to stone me? And I said, well, that would be great. Thank you. I was so excited that he offered. So I took out a handful of stones that I had been carrying around for this purpose. And they were small. They were small stones and pebbles. And I showed them to him, and he was very aggressive, an aggressive adulterer. He grabbed the stones out of my hand and threw them at my face. So I thought, an eye for an eye, I could throw them back at him. So that's how I checked that off my list. Now, after the year, I did shave my beard, which, by the way, I still keep in a plastic bag, but I won't go into details on that. I stopped stoning adulterers, but there are dozens of things that stayed with me, practices and beliefs, and I can't go into them all, of course, but I'll just give you a couple, a little taste. One of them is one of the most important for me is the idea of gratitude, because the Bible talks a lot about saying prayers of thanksgiving and being thankful for everything. So I took this literally, and I would be thankful for everything that went on in my life. So if I pressed the elevator button, I would be thankful that the elevator came. And if I got into the elevator, I'd be thankful it didn't plummet to the basement and break my collarbone. So I was doing this literally hundreds of times a day. And it was a very strange way to live, but it was also wonderful, because you realize, it drove home that there are hundreds of things that go right every day that we totally take for granted. And we focus on the 3 or 4 that go wrong. I'm thankful right now that this microphone is working, the PowerPoint, that's a miracle. So I've tried to keep that perspective. It's hard, but I feel that it's made my life a lot better. After the year, my wife and I did join a synagogue. As I mentioned last night, it's a Reform synagogue, and we don't really go. We go sometimes, not as often as we should. But I did want to give my kids a foundation in my religion, in our heritage. And whatever they decide to do is okay by me. If they decide to become observant or non-observant, as long as they're good people, as long as they're mensches. But I thought it was important to give them a little foundation so they could choose what they wanted from a place of knowledge. So that was some of the lessons I learned, and I'm happy to talk about any more during the Q&A. But I wanted to quickly end with the third part of my journey. So I had done the mind, I had done the spirit. Now I needed to do the body, and I really did need to do the body because I was in terrible shape. I looked like I was what they call skinny fat. I don't know if anyone knows that term, but my body looked like a snake that had swallowed a goat. So it was all right here, like 6 months pregnant. And then I got sick with pneumonia, and I was in the hospital, and my wife said, listen, you've got to get in shape. I don't want to be a widow in my 40s. And I said, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to try to do it the way I did my other projects and go all in. So I took all sorts of tests at first to see how I was at the start. So this is a brain test. I took cholesterol, the usual. I took sleep tests. Weirdly, I did not get a great night's sleep that night. I don't know why. And then I got a board of medical advisors, so doctors and nutritionists and scholars, and I made a list of every piece of health advice that I could find. And this turned out to be longer than the list for the Bible. Hundreds of rules. And I realized that if I'm going to do this, I pretty much no hobbies, no side projects. This is a full-time job, because if you're trying to be maximally healthy, there's so much to do. You've got to exercise, you've got to meditate. Meditating, there's so many proven benefits to your mind and your body from meditating. You got to put on sunscreen. If you follow what the dermatologists say, you've got to put on a shot glass full of sunscreen every 2 to 4 hours. That's a buttload of sunscreen. That takes some time. Even during the winter, they say. You've got to pet dogs. There's many studies about the benefits of dogs, and it'll lower your blood pressure if you pet it. I didn't have a dog, so I would go to the nearby dog park and pet strangers' dogs, which met with mixed reaction. You have to prepare food, because, as you know, processed food is terrible for you. You have to eat the food, and if you're eating in the most healthy way, that takes some time, because our moms were right. We need to start chewing our food. I actually ran across this movement on the internet where they are very passionate about chewing, passionate about mastication. They say, the movement is called Chewdeism, by the way. I didn't make that up, so I don't want any blame. But they say we should chew 100 times a mouthful, which is a crazy idea, because then it takes like a day and a half to eat a sandwich. But their general gist is right. We need to chew more because it does two things. First, it slows down your eating, which is incredibly important for portion control. The slower you eat, the less you eat. It takes 20 minutes, as you might know, for the message to get from the stomach to the brain that you're full. So eat more slowly. And it also helps with digestion. You get more nutrients. So as part of the experiment, I wanted to try everything. So I tried every fitness regimen I could, from the normal to the not so normal. I did something called stroller sizing, where you turn your kid into a piece of exercise equipment, basically. I did something called the caveman workout, where you go into the park and you throw boulders and climb trees, and there I am doing the cave. I loved, by the way, that they were some of my favorite people I met during my years, the people in the caveman movement, and they believe that our bodies were built to be on the savannah for hundreds of thousands of years. That's what evolution was guiding us towards. So that to be healthy, we should try to go back to the caveman lifestyle. And one of my favorite characters in the book is a guy named Vlad. And Vlad, he doesn't use any modern hygienic products like toothpaste or deodorant. And he was telling me about this. And then 5 minutes later, he was complaining to me about the lack of women in the caveman movement. And I didn't want to be rude, but I was like, maybe there's a causal connection there. But I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I tried all sorts of different diets. So the raw food diet, vegetarianism, the paleo diet. I tried something called calorie restriction, which was horrible. It was I don't know if you've heard of this movement, but they say if you eat very little, if you eat 70% of what the normal people eat, and you're almost on the verge of starvation all the time, you will live a lot longer. And of course, the question everyone has, that I had, was, yeah, but why would you want to? It's a horrible, like, if you can't have a waffle now and again, what's the point? But I went to dinner at the head of the Calorie Restriction Movement's house, and it was an interesting dinner. For the appetizer, we had a blueberry, and for the main course was a walnut. So, but just to be clear, we each got our own blueberry and walnut, so we didn't have to split it, so it wasn't crazy. I tried all sorts of products. From the normal to the not so normal. I won't go into and much detail on this, but just to tell you, one of the most interesting products I tried was called Nature's Platform. And this is because I learned during my year that I had been going to the bathroom incorrectly for 40 years, that we were not built to sit on the toilet, we were built to squat. And this is a gadget that you can put over your toilet that will turn your first world toilet into a more developing nation's toilet. And so this is what that looks like. I'll take it off. I don't want to alarm anyone. I know it's not lunch yet, so that was in my bathroom for maybe 3 days before my wife said, okay, get that out of here. Now, at the end, again, I couldn't keep everything, but there were many changes to my lifestyle that I have kept. And I'll just give you a couple of takeaways, and then you're free to ask any questions. One of the big ones is the idea of avoiding the sedentary life. One of the most alarming things about the year was reading all the research on how terrible sitting for extended periods of time is for you. And I'm sorry you guys are all sitting. I feel guilty saying that. But if you are at a desk all day, you know, it's so important to get up every hour and just walk around for a couple of minutes. I took it further and I got a treadmill, and I put my computer on top of the treadmill, and I wrote the book while walking. So it took me about 1,000 miles to write the book. And there's a group, I'm not alone, there's a group of people who do the treadmill desk, and I'm a big fan. So any way you can get movement into your life is good. It doesn't have to be sports, it can be gardening, but any type of movement, even fidgeting. Your mom, in this case, was wrong. Fidgeting is good. There are actual scientific studies on fidgeting that say that it helps burn calories. To get myself moving, one of the greatest motivators was the simplest one. It's just a pedometer, and I still have it with me. And just having a goal to get to 10,000 steps every day is so motivating. And it changes the way you look at movement. So instead of being annoyed about having to walk around the house looking for your lost keys, you're like, oh, at least I'm getting some steps. And I do cheat a little. I was just telling Josh earlier, I think it was Josh, that sometimes my kids will steal my pedometer and run around the house, and I sort of count that as my own. And I'm also, you can go on several websites and compare your steps with your friends' steps. And this is actually very motivating. Peer pressure has a negative connotation, but peer pressure is wonderful for becoming healthier. So I really have this competition with my friends about, you know, who can take more steps, and I am losing. It's an embarrassment. But I do get to 10,000, but a friend of mine gets like 25,000 a day. She's insane. In terms of food, I had to radically change my food consumption, and there are two ways. There's the quality and the quantity. So in terms of quantity, as you know, our portions in America are out of control. So trying to make my portions smaller was a huge part of my year. Judaism helped. Also trying to engineer your house to make it harder to get food. Even things like smaller plates leading to smaller portions. That's a good one. I took that farther, and I used my kids' cutlery. So I would use a small fork and a small spoon, and that slowed me down. Putting the healthy foods at eye level. We are so lazy that what we see at eye level is what we eat. So try that. And in terms of the quality of food, you know, it was hard because there's so much conflicting advice. There's the people who say carbs are the root of all evil. The others who say animal products are the root of all evil. But the good news about it is that each side agrees on maybe 70%. And Michael Pollan, I think, summed it up pretty well. He said, he's a food writer, he said, eat whole foods, meaning foods that look like they did when they came out of the ground, foods your grandmother would recognize. Eat whole foods, mostly plants. I think the science does support that. Mostly plants and not too much. So that's what I try to do. And both sides agree, I think, that processed carbs are quite horrible for you. So white sugar, white flour, white rice, even, I have to say, whole wheat flour. It sounds good, but they crush it up and you lose a lot of the benefits. So trying to avoid all that sugar is important. I mean, which is incredibly hard because my kids, I give them one of those little tiny Danoninos, those little yogurts. They have 18 grams of sugar. The recommended amount of sugar for a kid in one day is 12 grams of sugar. So they've done 150% of their sugar with one of those little things. Now, I will say, in closing, you don't want to get too crazy with the food because I think that can be counterproductive. I interviewed a guy who, he's a doctor in Colorado, who had come up with a new type of eating disorder, which is called orthorexia, which is an unhealthy obsession with healthy food. And his theory is that if you are so obsessed with getting just the right asparagus with, toxin-free, antioxidant-filled, and you obsess about that all day, and you can't go out to dinner with your friends because you're so restricted in your diet, that's not healthy. Because going out to dinner with your friends is so important. Having a strong social base is as important as food and exercise. So you don't want, joy and health should not be separate. They should be together. You should find exercise that you love. You should, and you should go out to dinner with friends because that's the whole point of health in the first place, is to be around long enough to enjoy your friends and family. And I will say, if you go out to dinner and you do drink, then that's okay. 1 glass of alcohol a day. Red wine is the best, but it doesn't have to be red wine. Any kind of alcohol is good. That was my favorite part of the project, was justifying my vices. So alcohol is good for you in moderation. Coffee has many benefits and staves off Alzheimer's, certain types of cancers. Chocolate, very good for you, very dark chocolate filled with antioxidants. Heroin, very good for you. That's not true. That one I made up. But the point is, try to find a way to make health and joy come together because it can happen. They don't have to be separate. With that, I will thank you and open it up to any questions. So thank you very much. Hello.
I was sorry to see that the TV pilot that you had been preparing wasn't picked up. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, particularly the casting deliveries that you had.
Well, thank you for asking. Yeah, one of my books was a collection of experiments I did, shorter experiments, and NBC bought it and tried to turn it into a TV series. And the TV business is so weird because they'll make like 10 of these pilots and then only put 3 or 4 of them on the air. Mine was in the 6 or 7 that did not appear on the air. But it was awesome experience they created this entire set of my apartment, and they had books and pictures of my my fake family, and it was Donald Sutherland played my father-in-law. And by the way, this is probably not biblical. This is Lashon Hara. But Donald Sutherland was a hilarious guy because he had very particular demands. You had to have a certain type of silk underwear available for him in his trailer at all times. So it was interesting to see how Hollywood works. But they spent a lot of money making this. Not that much of it went to me, but they spent $3 million, and then no one ever saw it except for my family. So I have the most expensive home movie in history. But it was about me. It was about a men's magazine writer who does these experiments, and every week he drives his wife to the brink of insanity, and then they make up at the end of 22 minutes. So that was it.
I have a question about your spiritual journey and meditation. Did you combine any Jewish practices with the meditation, or did you go an alternative route for that?
Well, I did. I mean, there were 2 times that I dealt with sort of spirituality. One was during the year of living biblically, which was interesting because I had to start praying, and I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I had never prayed before in my life. I say in the book, you know, I rarely said the word Lord unless it was followed by of the rings. So, so it was very confusing. And one of the fascinating things was that I mentioned earlier that how much your behavior affects your thoughts. So I was praying 5 times a day at least, and by the end, I couldn't help but believe in the God to whom I was praying because it's that powerful. Now, since the year has been over, I have sort of reverted to what I like to call Reverent Agnosticism. So I consider myself an agnostic. I don't know whether there's a God or not, but I believe in the idea of sacredness and how important that is to our lives. And prayer can be sacred. Rituals, like I love Jewish rituals. I feel they can be sacred, and time with your family. So anyway, I'm a reverent agnostic. And actually, someone started a Facebook page of Reverent Agnostics, so I was very flattered. But in terms of when I did the meditation, I went to a downtown New York meditation studio and did it there. So it was not Jewish related. It was more in the Buddhist tradition. And I am not the most, I don't have the best attention span, so I'm not the best meditator. You know, it was, I get distracted by these, you know, one guy next to me, he was breathing like Darth Vader, doing push-ups, and I couldn't focus. So I'm not the best meditator, but there are tons of scientifically proven benefits to meditation, so I wish I were better at it. Yeah.
Hello, thank you for coming. One question I had was, do you still speak with your spiritual advisors like Yossi? I really connected with him a lot. So, and I think I connected personally with most of the spiritual people that were connected with you and when you were writing the books.
Well, I was very lucky. I had these great spiritual advisors who were so wise. And yes, I do still speak to them. There's a friend of mine who's an Orthodox Jew. I was mentioning last night, he was the one who told me that you can see life as a series of rights or life as a series of responsibilities. And in the biblical times, it was more a series of responsibilities. And I love that way of looking at the world. I think you need a balance. There's also a guy who is named Mr. Berkowitz, who is one of my advisors, who is he is a Shatnez inspector. For those who don't know, Shatnez is the rule that says you cannot mix fibers, or specifically wool and linen. The Bible says do not mix wool and linen. And there are many Orthodox Jews who still follow this, and there are people like Mr. Berkowitz you can hire. And he came to my house with a microscope, and he went through my closet looking to see if there were any mixed fibers, mixed wool and linen. Turns out my wedding suit had mixed wool and linen. So my wedding is not kosher. So I'm not sure I'm married to in the eyes of God. But he still calls all the time.
Hi. I wonder if you did anything about the Shabbat. It's so central to Judaism. Did you practice, and is anything left of it?
I did. In fact, that is one of my favorite things about the year, and one I try to keep is Shabbat, because as you point out, it's so central, and especially now when there's no difference between the work day and the work night, and the weekend and the weekday, because we're all on our iPhones or Androids all the time. So to disconnect is so important, and it's such a restorative thing. So I have tried to keep that. I don't do the Orthodox Shabbat, but I try not to work or answer emails or get on the phone. Yeah, I love Rabbi Heschel's quote that it's a sanctuary in time. I thought that really resonated with me. I will say it was confusing though, because during the year my friend pointed out that observing the Sabbath was for me work, because I was working on a book about following the rules. So that confused me for several weeks, but I decided to keep it. Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Nancy Rossiter. I'm the Director of Business Programs here at Bay Path College, and like everyone else, thank you for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
My question for you has to do with your next project. I know My Outsourced Life, which I really enjoyed as part of Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week,
right.
Was about outsourcing in business, and that maybe your next project might have something to do with financial management. I mean, I can imagine being a journalist in New York City has got to be interesting. So you've done your mind, you've done your spirit, you've done your body, so why not?
It's a great idea, and I have considered it, and I'm still thinking about it. I haven't settled on my next big project, but I'm doing a couple of smaller projects. The one that just came out, it's not financial, but it is sort of related to the outsourced life in a way. It is, there's a movement called life logging. And the idea is that our memories are terrible, so we need all the help we can get. So these people videotape their lives 24 hours a day. So that's what I did. I wore a little camera on my ear, and it taped everything. And the idea was that 70% of my arguments with my wife are like, you didn't say, that's not what you said. You never told me that. So now I could say, well, let's go to the videotape. And that turned out not to be a successful strategy. It was kind of a lose-lose. Because if I was right, then she just got angrier. And if I was wrong, which is most of the time, then I was a loser. So, but there are advantages to this life logging. I mean, I loved the fact that I was able to capture these moments with my kids that would normally have just gone into the vapor. And I really do think our memories are, my memory is just a disaster. I make up. I have no idea what happened in my childhood because, I recently went to Disney World with my kids, and I had such strong memories of going to Epcot Center when I was a kid. And I called my mom and I said, how old was I when we went there? And she said, we never went there. It was all from like watching a TV show about Disney World, and I had co-opted the memory. Any other questions? Brianna.
So we know you're not supposed to sit, and everybody sits at a desk now.
Right.
So did you do the treadmill thing, which I would love to have, and my boss keeps on promoting. But did you ever do the ball, sitting on the ball? Because then you can bounce while you're doing your type. Yeah, that's what I do.
On the ball. One study said that it burns 30 more calories per hour than sitting. So, that's something. And standing, there's a big trend towards standing desks. I have trouble with just standing still. I get more tired because the blood sort of pools in your legs. So I actually prefer walking. But standing is better for you if you can do it. But again, you don't have to get a treadmill desk. As long as you get up every half hour, 45 minutes, and just walk around a little, that makes a huge difference.
Pretty hard to do.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, I work at home, which is a problem because, there's the kitchen is right there. So it's a terrible distraction. Anything else? Well, thank you guys so much for coming. I had a wonderful time. Thank you.